2,000 liters at a time. That's why we're constantly having to say, we're going to have to stop tomorrow because we don't know whether or not we'll be able to get any tomorrow. Now, having said that, that fuel pump is pretty well exhausted. There may be some 100,000 or so left, but as you get down into the fuel pump, the fuel becomes too dirty to use. So we're not exactly sure if we're going to be able to get more or not. So I just wanted to clarify that because I know there's lots of questions about that and some clarity was probably needed.
Indeed, thank you very much. In the room, we also have Mohammed, our correspondent of Anadolu Vansi.
Thank you for this briefing, Lynn. As you mentioned, there are 7,000 people, including 3,000 children, were killed in Israel's attack on Gaza. There are those who describe this as a genocide attempt. Also, United Nations special reporters said that there is a risk of genocide in Gaza. I was wondering what prevents you from calling this is a massacre? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, it's really not for me to call out issues that are very legal and technical. So I wouldn't call that out. That is for somebody with better expertise than myself.
And as we have already discussed at this briefing, Mohammed, this question has been asked to our colleagues of OHCHR, and they have, and I refer you to their answer about the fact that this is using a definition like that needs a thorough investigation and a number of criteria to be filled. So I would please ask you to reconsult with our colleagues of the OHCHR on this matter. If there are no other questions in the room, I'll go to the platform. There are quite a few. I'll start with Christian Rieck, who is our correspondent of the German news agency, DPA. Christian.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Alessandra. Lynn, can you just clarify the fuel you mentioned paid for by Qatar? When was that brought into the Gaza Strip? And my more substantial question is, do you know anything about fuel depots held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip? Because that is one of the arguments Israel is using, that Hamas could actually supply hospitals. Thank you.
Yeah. So fuel has been coming in through Egypt since just after May 2021. So when this particular load was delivered, I don't know. But there was about 1 million liters on October 6th. And so UNRWA has been gradually been able to access that, as I say, with coordination. Fuel that I'm aware of that Hamas would have had access to before October 6th is at this fuel pump that I'm talking about. I'm not aware of any other Hamas reserves. So, and I know I've seen some documentation from the Israelis about using other sources, etc. But for example, I think they indicated that the remaining reserves could be used for, can't remember if it was desalination or hospitals for the next month, but that would mean nothing else would have fuel. So as always, the devils are a bit in the detail. Thanks.
Indeed. We have Jamil Shade, our Brazilian journalist from UOL.
Yes, good morning. I have two questions. First of all, from this situation that you mentioned, and especially on UNRWA, what kind of services have been already finished or are not operating in the same level as of the last 4 or 5 days, let's say? What kind of services you had to scale down, if you could give us details on that? And secondly, on the visas by Israel, how much has that affected your operation? How many people have requested visas and have been denied? Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of scaling down, well, you know, UNRWA used to provide healthcare, education, jobs, all of that has pretty well stopped since October 7th. And whether or not this is a service from UNRWA or just a basic service to the population, of course, the access to clean drinking water, the access to healthcare, that has all significantly dropped, including the healthcare from UNRWA. Now, let's take, for example, the shelters. As I've said, they're at 2.5% of capacity. Most people who are there are being provided 1 liter of water from UNRWA. So that's a service delivery, which isn't anywhere near what it needs to be. The sanitation systems across, not just the shelters, but across Gaza are all being blocked up. All the raw sewage is being pumped into the sea. But once that fuel runs out, whether or not it's tomorrow or on Monday, depending on the access to the fuel, that means the fuel is not going to be able to be put into the sea, which in and of itself is highly problematic, as we all know, but it will start overflowing onto the streets. The bakeries are also very short on fuel. UNRWA has been providing them with flour that's been coming in, but they're obviously having to ration the fuel, and their estimates of what they need to provide the population with. I think there was some estimate that they were going to be able to last for 20 days, and now it's down to 11. So this is an ongoing condition where everything is gradually cut and everything is being...
Lynn, we've lost you.
Oh.
We've lost your last words. I don't know what's happening. It's just 1 second, please.
Yeah.
Can you please try, if you may repeat the last sentence, because we didn't hear it.
I'm trying to think of what
No, we can't hear you. We've lost your voice. Just 1 second. I'm looking at my colleagues in the régie. Sorry for that, Lynn.
That's okay. Can you hear me now? No.
Can you please make me a sign when it's... Sorry, Lynn, I see they are doing something.
Oh yeah, they lost me. Not online.
Oh, no.
But
now we can hear you.
In the room. All right. Okay, great.
You're back. You're back.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you now remember your last sentence.
I think I was talking about bakeries. Did I?
Yes, exactly. You were saying that the fuel, the bakeries had been given flour, but from UNRWA, but said that they didn't have the fuel.
Yeah, so they estimated that they would be able to bake bread for about 20 days for over 1 million people, but now that's down to 11 days because of the lack of fuel, but also obviously the demand. On the visa issue, we haven't had any issues denied yet. And this is a threat that has been made before by the government of Israel. And we have been informed that at the working level, that order not to issue visas has not been given yet. So it will just be a matter of the next few days to see if anything will be denied.
And maybe I can add on that what the spokesperson of the Secretary General said yesterday about this issue. We said that the UN are continuing to engage through the normal channels with Israeli officials in order to get the visas that are needed for the UN staff. I'll go to the next question. Lynn, sorry, maybe this is a question more for the people who are with you. I don't know if Mini or somebody else can send also your notes, because there were a lot of numbers, a lot of figures, and the journalists are asking if it's possible to have them in writing as soon as possible. Thank you very much. So let's go to Antonio Broto, who is our correspondent of the Spanish news agency, EFE. Decidedly, we have a problem today. We have lost Antonio. So while we get him back, let's go to Catherine Fiancon, France 24. And Ismini confirms that they were going to send the facts and figures. Catherine, vas-y.
Yes, good morning, Alessandra. Good morning, Lynn. Alessandra, online, we did not lose Lynn. We heard her perfectly. So
thanks to let us know. So it was a problem in the press room.
Yes.
Go ahead, ask your question to Lynn.
Yes, so thank you for sending the notes as soon as possible as requested by Alessandra. Thank you, Lynn, for all the details. Regarding the fuel quantities, do you have figures to provide us about what is normally needed per day or per month? Because you just mentioned 1 million liters. But to what extent it corresponds, how many days or a month? And the other question I had was related to the decision of French President Macron to send the French hospital ship that is supposed to arrive, I don't know, maybe is it during the weekend? Will it help? Will you be able to work with that hospital ship? And restrictions, visa restrictions, you say that until now you haven't been impacted, but what we heard is that Israel is in fact providing an unrestricted number of visas to humanitarian people before October 7. There was problems for humanitarian people to get visas to go anyway. And my last element was what you mentioned, that you haven't been able to coordinate with Israel. What does it mean about certain elements? Does it mean that you have problem of communication or with Israel, or is there, I don't know, the speed is a very low speed in answering your requests? Could you be a bit more precise about the kind of relations that you have with the authorities? Thank you so much, Lynn.
Thank you. Lynn.
Yep. Okay. So the fuel and electricity is a little bit tricky because electricity comes from a bunch of sources. So before October 7th, there were 46 trucks of fuel that crossed daily. But of course, there's also the issue of the electricity lines, which provided electricity, obviously. And so before the escalation, we had, I'm trying to see, I've only got a bar graph here without a number, but let's say it was about 30% of the electricity or the energy sources that were coming from Israeli lines. And then we have a Gaza power plant. So as I say, it's a little bit difficult, but I think the 46 trucks of fuel is a good indicator. And of course, the Gaza power plant, which probably provides around 15% of the fuel, is no longer operating. So I think that gives you some idea. 782 trucks would have crossed from October 7th to date, and none of those have come across with fuel. In terms of the ship, the United Nations would, I assume, I haven't actually had a discussion on this, but obviously would welcome this. The issue will be, of course, getting patients out to it and back again, and what type of processes that involves, which takes me to the coordination with the government of Israel. We are in touch with them at least every single hour of every day, often till late at night in terms of coordination. So when I said we weren't able to coordinate, it was specifically with respect to accessing the fuel that was at the pump at Rafah on a regular basis. Some days we were able to, and other days we were not. Now, in terms of the coordination of the number of goods going in, I have called for that process to allow for increased volume at a faster rate. Currently, somewhere between 10 and 20 trucks to date, or each day, sorry, is clearly not sufficient when there were 450 trucks going in daily before October 7th. What we need is a faster mechanism. It's not an issue of them not getting back to us. It's an issue of very, very, very detailed negotiations to try and make sure that Israel's security concerns, which are quite legitimate, especially with respect to fuel, which is what we call a high-risk dual-use item. And so there's very detailed discussions going on about how we can increase the volume and the pace of assistance that's going in. Yes, and it's correct on the visa issue that even before October 7th, there were certain agencies who were going through different processes. I'm sure most of you know that OHCHR, High Commissioner for Human Rights offices, were not able to get visas to get into Palestine for, I think it's 2.5 years now. The head of the OHCHR office, who works out of Amman with the rest of the team, with the rest of the international staff who needs visas, was given a visa for the first time in 2.5 years about a month ago. So he has been able to come back and forth between Amman and Palestine.
Thank you, Lynn. And one of the journalists, Paul, is asking confirmation. You said 780 trucks would have passed since October the 6th. That's what you said. The number was that?
Yeah, I just got this information today, so I don't have the numbers at the top of my head. So yes. Oh, sorry.
Maybe Vinny can also.
782 would have gone in.
Would have passed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So let me go. Thank you very much. So let me go back to Antonio that we have recuperated now from the Spanish news agency. We should be able to hear him.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So with all the bombings now in the south of Gaza and the launching of the operations for Israel in the center of the Strip, do you think there is now a place in Gaza that is safer than the others? And also, do you think that the evacuation orders of Israel have any meaning now? Thank you.
I think the UN's been saying for quite some time that there's really nowhere safe right now. We have reported that some of the Palestinians who moved south have moved back to the north because of the airstrikes in the south, but also because of the living conditions in the south are untenable for them. And I think you need to ask Palestinians who are in Gaza whether or not those evacuation warnings are of any meaning to them or not.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Bianca Routier, who is our correspondent of Globo TV from Brazil.
Hi, thanks, Alessandra. Yeah, of course, you are talking about the humanitarian aid arriving in Gaza, but I would like to know if in the other way, would you also be able to update us about the foreigners that are in Gaza and waiting to cross Rafah border? If you know how the negotiations are in order to allow these people to leave Egypt, to leave Gaza to exit Egypt. And also, UNRWA said that without fuel, humanitarian works need to make terrible choices. Could you also tell us which kind of choices are that? Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. With respect to the 7,000 nationals, some member states are engaged in the negotiations, so I will leave them to answer that question. But it is obviously a matter of concern. We all have staff, or there are nationals of member states who are quite obviously anxious to get out. The terrible choices include things like, where do you deliver what's inside those 10 to 20 trucks a day? Which community do you send them to? Which bakeries do you give flour and fuel to? Which desalination plants should be turned on or off? Who do you give water to? Which hospital do you send medication to? So I think we can all see what those types of choices mean for people who have to make them.
And during the regular briefing, we'll hear more about the hospitals from the local representative of WHO. I see a lot of other questions. Lynn, I know we had told you until 10:15. Is it possible that we take a few more?
Yeah.
You got the time, thank you. So my next on the list is Nick Cumming-Bruce, our correspondent of the New York Times.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, and thanks for the briefing. A quick question on the number of trucks crossing. I'm not quite clear what's keeping the number so small. Is it the physical screening capacity? Is it the requirement of the Israeli authorities to see sort of detailed lists of what's on these trucks? What exactly is slowing that process down? Secondly, is there any specific proposal to get fuel trucks in any particular number across the border at this particular point? Is that being discussed on a daily basis? And finally, could you just say when was the last time aid actually went to the north, and whether there's some clarity on the routes that could be used to get it there if that was allowed? Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. So in terms of the delays, yes, it's a combination of what you said. It's the screening. So what's happening is the trucks are coming from El Arish, which is in Egypt along the coast, close to the border with Gaza. Then they go down to a place called Nitzana. They're screened by a scanner, but they're also what we call back-to-back. So everything's unloaded, the pallets are inspected, and then they go on to another truck, and then they drive up to Rafah, and then they go in back-to-back as well. So sometimes that process just didn't start fast enough. That particular day, there were several times when the goods arrived at night, and I'll get to that in a moment, and the implications for that. But so the screening and the requirements in terms of the packing, President Biden had to call Prime Minister Netanyahu on the second day that goods were supposed to go in. So that would have been the 22nd or the 23rd or something like that, because in addition to the technical issues and the security issues, there's political issues as well. And there's a certain amount of pressure on the government of Israel in terms of its domestic politics, and you can ask them about that. And that delays things just also in terms of the maximum number that I think the government of Israel is prepared to allow us to bring in. So it's technical and political security. All of those issues are at play. Yes, we're negotiating intensively. And as I've said, we're in touch with various parts of the Israeli government on almost a daily basis. We need to get the trucks back up to, well, we need the electricity lines to be reconnected. And I've heard the government of Israel saying they will not be doing that. We need to get the fuel trucks in. We need to get fuel for the Gaza power plant running again. And we need to do it in a secure way that offers Israel assurances to make sure that it's not going to be diverted. So those can be very tricky. It needs to be secure and balanced with making sure we're able to get the fuel in. Aid to the north, there have been some deliveries made to Shifa Hospital, etc. We have a system in place globally called the Humanitarian Notification System. And this is something that is used worldwide in conflicts like this, where parties to the conflict are expected to acknowledge and accommodate humanitarian notifications. So when we notify a party to the conflict, we are going to be moving here in 2 hours, here's the coordinates, and this is what we're delivering. There is an expectation of parties to the conflict that they will ensure that there are no strikes in those areas at the time.
Thank you very much. Imogen Fawkes, the BBC correspondent in Geneva.
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Go ahead.
Okay, 2 questions. First, there's been dispute about the number of deaths in Gaza. Some are questioning and suggesting that that the authorities in Gaza are exaggerating them. And the second about getting aid to the north, I think we heard just a day or two ago that the security guarantees to move aid efficiently around Gaza and especially to the north were just not forthcoming. Does that remain the case? You were slightly vague your answer originally.
Yeah. So yeah, I've heard the reports about the numbers as well. Currently, the UN is relying on the numbers from the Ministry of Health inside of Gaza, just as we did rely on the numbers provided to us by the government of Israel in terms of the casualties from October 7th. We're in a situation right now where it's obviously very, very difficult for us to confirm them. We do have processes for every time there is violence, be it an escalation in Gaza or casualties in the West Bank, where we do try and confirm everything. This is obviously going to be a long-term process. Right now, people who bodies are actually stacked up outside. There is no proper organization, but the Ministry of Health did send us all the names of everybody who's been killed. So for the moment, we attribute the sources. I will leave it to you to determine whether or not you believe they are accurate, but I guess at some point, how many thousands dead is too many to start calling for an end to this. In terms of, yeah, so the government of Israel has been clear that they don't want us delivering in the north. So our staff will have to assume certain security risks if we determine the assistance that we have to be life-saving and needs to be delivered. We have a very, we obviously have a risk and security mechanism that we go by to determine whether or not we should be delivering under certain circumstances.
Thank you very much. John Zaro Costas, France 24 English Channel and The Lancet. John, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me
Yeah,
now?
now it's fine. Yeah, you're on.
Yes. Good morning. I was wondering if you could please clarify a little bit on the figures you gave earlier. You said that 2/3 of the primary health clinics had to close because they were either damaged or lack of fuel. Can you tell us how many had to close down because they were damaged? And also the same with the hospitals. You said 1/3 shut down. How many was it due to damage or to lack of fuel? And are you prioritizing the fuel supplies to hospitals as the ones where they have the maximum of dialysis machines and incubators where without the power there could be certain death?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if I've got the, I don't think I have the exact split in terms of damage versus fuel. I suspect some of them have an issue with both of that. Yeah, I don't have that breakdown, sorry. And then just, yes, this prioritization is exactly the issue about the difficult decisions. So we are aware of the 1,000 patients that require dialysis and over 100 children, babies that are in incubators. So we do our best to try and make the prioritization in accordance with the greatest needs.
Jamila, I see you have a follow-up, but bear with me. Let me go to the other two, give a chance to everybody to ask a question, and I'll come back to you if we have time. Musa Asi is our correspondent from Al Mayadeen. Musa, we can't hear you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, who's that?
The representative of Palestinian Authority told us yesterday more than 1,000 Palestinians who were working in Israel were arrested by Israeli forces after October 7. Do you confirm that? And if you have any information about the status of these people? Thank you.
I'm not able to confirm those numbers, sorry. And most To be honest with you, I'm not able to determine whether or not charges have been laid or if they're in administrative detention. Our colleagues from OHCHR would be following that up, but I don't have the data with me right now.
Yeah, and Ravina is coming in a moment to brief you on the human rights situation in the Palestinian territory. So you can ask that question to her. Emma Farge, Reuters.
Yes, good morning. I was just wondering how much aid currently is stuck at the border waiting to go into Gaza. Can you quantify that? Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know the exact number of trucks that are there right now. The last count, which was some time ago, was 150. The issue also, though, is how much aid actually stuck at El Rish. And I actually don't have that number, so I will look into that because that's an important question.
And I take the opportunity to tell you that Ismini Palla, that you all know because she was actually doing, heading the communication on our Black Sea Grain Initiative, is now working with Lynn. You have her contact. So if you need to follow up on what Lynn said, or Lynn, please, Ismini has the contact with our journalist, and I welcome her. She's online. Jamil, thank you for your patience. You want to ask your follow-up?
Yes, thank you so much. It's just a clarification. First, on the numbers of foreigners in Gaza, you mentioned 7,000. Is that correct? 7,000 foreigners in Gaza negotiating a departure. And secondly, also a clarification on the fuel, on the reports of fuel with Hamas. You first said you're not aware, but then you said that if there are, then it would be used for this and not that. But can you be clear? Are you aware or you're not aware of the existence of fuel with Hamas? Thank you.
Yep. I didn't actually say 7,000. Whoever asked the question said 7,000. I have heard 7,000. I have not seen a list. So I cannot confirm if it's 7,000 or not. So on the fuel, what I did confirm is that there's a fuel pump at Rafah on the side in Gaza. There was, to our knowledge, and our UNRWA staff have gone out to access 200,000 liters 4 days, right? 200,000 for on how do you say that? Accessing fuel for over the course of 4 days, 200,000 liters each. We have used that for UNRWA operations, hospitals, and desalination plants, and some bakeries. That's what I know. I have heard allegations that maybe Hamas has others. I am not privy to that information.
Catherine, I've just seen your chat. I put the contact details of Ismini in the chat, but maybe you have a follow-up and then we'll close.
Thank you, Alessandra. Yes, because it would be nice to share the contact details of the communication person in the chat.
I put it in the chat.
Yes, thank you so much, Alessandra and Lynn. No, I'd like to come back on what Jamil just asked, because I took note about 7,000 people dead, included 3,000 children. So could you be very, very clear on what you know and what you don't know, what has been confirmed and not confirmed? That is the reason why we need your notes as soon as possible. Please, that would be very nice of you and very useful. And the second element was regarding the arrests. Do you confirm that people have been arrested? We don't, it's not a question how many or what, but is it clear that you got the information that people have been arrested since October 7? Yes or no? Thank you.
Okay. I think there's confusion about the 7,000 number, because unfortunately, I think what I said was at least 6,500 dead, and that is a number from the Gaza Ministry of Health. They have sent out a list of all the names of those people who have died. That's where I described the fact that we would be trying to confirm that number, and any increases in the number, maybe it will be less in the end. There's a lot of people who are missing. We will try and do that throughout however long this war lasts and after the war. But I'm sure you can all appreciate that the UN cannot come out with a number right now because we're not able to do the proper verification. Unfortunately, the other 7,000 number is the number of nationals who are going out, which I thought is what Jamil was talking about, but maybe I was wrong on that. 7,000 nationals is a list that has been compiled not by the United Nations. I'm not able to confirm that. The arrests I have seen reports, but please ask my OHCHR colleagues.
Yeah, in a moment.
I am personally not in a position to tell you, okay? Because I don't have that information in front of me.
No worries, Lynn. Lynn, I'm sorry, there is AFP who's asking for the floor. If you can take that last questions, then we will close and we will go to the regular briefing. Just the very last. Robin Miller.
Thank you. Just a question on the fuel. In normal times, who is buying the fuel and who is selling the fuel? Is it the United Nations buying from Israel? Is it just a straight UN transaction across the border? Is it Hamas buying from Israel? What in normal times, how does that work? Thank you.
Yeah, so there's many different ways. UNRWA has been buying fuel through Israel for, I guess, decades. So that's one way. The fuel for the Gaza power plant also came in through Israel. And then there's lots of private businesses in Gaza, and they have their own ways to bring in fuel, and the UN, we're not monitoring all of that. They have relationships of their own with either fuel companies in Israel and also with Kogat, who administers these things on behalf of the Israelis. So the private market, UN market, the PA Gaza power plant, various, like any society, it's just more difficult to get things in, but all sorts of different vendors, I guess, and there was also fuel coming in through Egypt. So a lot of, I think, Palestinians would buy through Egypt as well.
Lynn, thank you so very much for your time, for your being so generous with your time. We really wish you, first of all, to stay safe. That's the most important thing, and also to continue with your incredibly important work. Please come back and brief the journalists here in Geneva whenever you want. We will always be happy to hear from you. And thanks to Ismini for following up on the questions of the journalists. I'd like to ask everybody now to make a 5-minute pause, and then we will start with the regular press briefing, and we will still be talking about the situation in the Middle East with the representatives of the World Food Programme, WHO, and Ravina from OHCHR. Thank you very much again to our colleagues of OCHA and Lynn in particular. I'll see you in 5 minutes here. Same link.
Hello, Mr. Abdel Jaber. Can we please test your audio and your video? You need to
Morning,
unmute
can you
your
hear me?
Zoom. Yes, now I can hear you. Yes, can you please say a few words?
Good morning. One, two,
Yes.
three, four, five.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. Hello, Tariq. Can we please do a quick test?
Yep. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes. Hello. How are you?
Good, good. Can you also please check with Dr. Peppercorn?
Yeah, I'm gonna do it next. Okay. Perfect.
you.
Thank you. Yes. Hello, Dr. Richard. How are you? Can we please do a quick test? You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Can you speak a few words? Where are you talking from?
Yeah, all right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I will repeat what Summer just did.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Hello, Mrs. Speaker. Can we please do a quick test?
Yes, I cannot use the video because I'm on mission and the line is a little dodgy, so I won't be using it. Okay, but how is the sound? Is that
The
okay?
audio is perfect. Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
C'est bon? So welcome back to this second part of the press briefing here in Geneva at the UN. We have spoken a lot about the situation in the Palestinian territories with Lynn Hastings, the Humanitarian Coordinator, before, and we will continue to do so with our guests of this morning. But just Ravina is arriving, so give me 1 minute. Maybe I will give the floor quickly to Isabelle Piquet, who has an announcement, and then we will go to the situation in the Middle East in a minute. Isabel, you want to give your announcement first?
Yes, yes, many thanks. Apologies for not joining you on video. I'm on mission and the connection isn't that good. So the ILO governing body will hold its fall session in Geneva next week, starting on Monday, October 30th and 11th of November. The governing body agenda includes discussions on the Global Coalition for Social Justice, apprenticeship, labor protection, just transition, the elimination of violence and harassment in the world of work, and the right to strike, among other topics. It will also examine several country cases, including Belarus, Guatemala, Myanmar, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Members of the press can follow proceedings of the governing body from the public gallery, but cannot film or take photos. And if you want more details, please feel free to email us at newsroom@ilo.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabelle. And Bonne Mission, I don't see questions for you. So I'm told Ravina is on her way. So, but maybe we now start with our two other guests to continue speaking on the situation in the Middle East. So I have the pleasure to welcome Samer Abdel-Jaber, who is the World Food Programme Country Director for Palestine. Samer, you're speaking from Jerusalem. To give us an update on the food situation in Gaza.
Thank you very much. So I'll start actually with a couple of things that I've visited Gaza many times over the years, and a small and lively sliver of land, no bigger than actually Washington, D.C., bordered by land and sea where more than 2 million people live. I've met with families who have lost their everything, escalation after escalation, yet have somehow always found a way to keep their hopes alive. Today, I have spoken to some that have told me that unlike anything they have ever seen, this is the situation that they are seeing at the moment. More than 1.4 million people in Gaza have been forced to flee their homes. Nearly half are residing in UN shelters. And to be more accurate, those UN shelters are schools that are accommodating many people. In a room the size of a classroom, more than 70 people sleep, eat, drink, and take care of their families as they desperately hope to find safety. But the reality is not anywhere in Gaza, that nowhere in Gaza is safe. Some of these very shelters have been impacted by airstrikes and violence. Try for a moment to imagine yourself and your family having to seek refuge in a shelter where food is running out. There is no access to running water, and electricity is but a rarity. Now imagine that this shelter is an entire city, and this is the reality for over 2 million people in Gaza. Hospitals are unable to fully operate, like we've heard from Lynn, and you will hear it later from WHO, due to a shortage of electricity and medicine. Hundreds of sick and injured people can't find the proper treatment. Infants in incubators are at risk due to lack of electricity. Bakeries that have been providing bread, the simplest sustenance, will shut within days if fuel is not allowed in. People are risking their lives and queuing for hours to secure bread, and many are going back to their shelter with no bread in their hands. The notion of a warm meal is out of reach. There is simply no way for people to cook. In the words of one of our dear team members in Gaza, the situation is like a nightmare that we cannot wake up from. Humanitarian convoys have been trickling in since 21st of October, after an initial of 2 weeks of no humanitarian cargo going into Gaza, but their scale and frequency are nowhere near enough to alleviate the suffering of the people. Today, WFP has brought in 9 trucks of food assistance, mainly canned food, wheat flour, and other essentials, but that does not even amount to 2% of the food that we would need to reach the people in need. Within the first 48 hours, WFP has been delivering emergency food assistance to IDPs who are in the shelters. This assistance has mainly been fresh bread and canned tuna for nearly 500,000 people in Gaza. While we are working around the clock to deliver every day, the reality is that for every person receiving assistance, 6 more are in need. In the communities, we continue providing food vouchers to help people, but although stocks at the retail shops are dwindling, we have transferred assistance to 275,000 people in Gaza and 61,000 in the West Bank. Overall, we reached close to 650,000 people in Gaza and the West Bank, but I stand here today to tell you that this is still not enough. WFP is continuing to position food in different locations outside Gaza so that we are able to immediately respond once access is granted. We, together with other humanitarian actors, continue to advocate for more crossings being available so that we can reach more people. Our plan is to reach more than 1 million people in the next 2 months with a lifeline of food. But none of this will be possible without continued, safe, scaled-up access and without additional fuel to allow bakeries to run and food to be distributed. In the beginning, WFP worked with 23 bakeries to provide fresh bread, and that was supposed to be reaching only maximum 200,000 people in shelters. But with the shortage of fuel, today, only 2 are able to operate. Tomorrow, there might be none. We cannot sit and wait for people to starve. More than 500,000 of the population in Gaza was struggling to afford a basic meal before the crisis, having some of the highest unemployment and poverty rates in the world. I struggle to imagine how these people are getting by now, and I cannot fathom the sheer desperation they must feel. As a father myself, I cannot conceive what the future will hold for mothers and their children who do not have enough food to prevent malnutrition and its subsequent consequences. Over 100,000 infants in Gaza will be exposed to infectious diseases and malnutrition that are likely to impact their entire lives unless we are able to assist with food now. Our ask is simple. We urge for continued safe access for humanitarian supplies into Gaza at a scale that matches the needs. 20 trucks a day is not enough. And without fuel, there will be no hospitals running, no bakeries making bread, and no water supplies. We call for the protection of civilians and essential services. Places that provide people with basic humanitarian services like medical care, food, and water should be protected. Today, 10% of bakeries in Gaza have been hit. And while we look at Gaza, let's not forget the Palestinians of the West Bank, who have also been facing increased violence, arrest, and movement restrictions. To ease the suffering and enable the delivery of urgent, needed life-saving assistance, we echo the WFP echoes the Secretary General's appeal for a humanitarian ceasefire. The people of Gaza need continuous aid delivery at a level that corresponds to the enormous needs. I would like to end my remarks by extending my deepest gratitude and support to the humanitarian workers in Gaza, working tirelessly and bravely under these extreme conditions to deliver life-saving assistance. This is a moment where all humanitarian efforts are working hand in hand, and we hope humanity will prevail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samer, for this briefing. And yes, we hear your passionate words. I'll go now to our colleague of WHO. Tariq is in Cairo, and he is with us today with Dr. Richard Peppercorn, who is the WHO representative in the Occupied Palestinian Territory and who's speaking to us from Jerusalem. I don't know, Tariq, if you want to start, or we keep the floor immediately to the doctor.
Thanks, Alessandra. Let's go straight to Dr. Peppercorn in Jerusalem.
Dr. Peppercorn, please.
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, and now we can see you. Yes.
Great.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Yeah, I will, of course, focus on health and listening carefully to what Lynn Hastings and also my colleague Samer just said. A lot of discussions. Let me first focus on the data. Deaths. We get reported data on 7,045 deaths, of which 55% are males and 45% are female. And from the total, 41% are children. At injuries, we talk about 18,482, of which 34% are female, 67% are male, and from the total, 33% are children. The key messages, I think, for us are the same, and I think it was related to access for fuel, food, water, and medical supplies. Also, to get an estimate of 200 critical patients out, evacuated, access to and within Gaza, it cannot be emphasized enough. I want to say something about the health system's access and functionality. We heard a lot about fuel and why fuel is needed. So please realize, at the moment there are 1,000 patients in need for kidney dialysis. wherefore you need fuel. 130 premature babies in incubators, 2,000 cancer patients at risk, and multiple patients, course of patients, ICU, ventilators, etc. They receive assisted care. Medical equipment is increasingly not functioning. When we talk about the hospital capacity, the health system in Gaza has always been remarkable resilience. But of course, the rationing and stretching of the supplies to maintain its critical functions, which are at risk due to fuel, which are running out, and health supplies. Gaza health workers have been remarkable resilience in many of the escalations and conflicts they've gone through. But of course, at the moment, this is actually, and I will get back to that a little later, this is beyond everyone's imagination. 23 of the 35 hospitals, I still want to stress that, are partly functional. The critical functionals are at risk. You have only 8 hospitals with surgical capacity south of Gaza, and they're all partly functional. What we estimated, because we had a lot of talk, there's a need for 35,000 liters of fuel per day to keep the key 12 major hospitals, having their minimum requirements to keep the critical functions running. Moreover, 65% of the primary healthcare clinics are not functioning, including over 65% of the UNRWA primary healthcare clinics are closed, and the remaining are all partially functioning. 2 other areas I want to stress: attacks on health. So we registered 16 health workers killed on duty, 30 injured, 24 ambulances damaged, and over 34 health facilities affected. I think it's very important to focus a bit on the health risks, and my colleagues actually, Samir also raised it a little bit. We don't only talk about trauma and injuries, which is of course worsening due to increasing in daily casualties. Hospitals are overwhelmed with supplies. All supplies are short. We also talk about non-communicable diseases. We talk about 350,000 patients in Gaza, about the diabetes, where you need your insulin, heart disease, cancer, etc. Maternal and neonatal situation, of course, acutely worsening. We talk about 50,000 pregnant women with an average of 183 births per day. What we witness now, and WHO is trying to make the best assessment with UNRWA in the shelters and the makeshift shelters, increasing number of respiratory tract infections in these overcrowded shelters and hospitals. Many of the hospitals are used as makeshift shelters. Cases of diarrhea have been reported, deteriorating wash and living conditions, etc. Malnutrition, raised by my colleague of WFP, skin infection, and of course, mental health, which is always, I think, almost forgotten, and for the general population, but specifically also for these health workers. Now, what is the response today? I will focus a little bit on WHO and tell you one story. So, the 5 trucks of WHO have been all distributed enough essential supplies for approximately 300,000 people: trauma, essential health, medicine, etc., primary healthcare related medication. Delivered to 7 hospitals and for the PRC ambulance, there's 5 in the south and 2 in the north. Through UNRWA, with UNRWA, some minimum requirements of fuels have been delivered to 6 major hospitals south in Gaza, nothing to the north. We've secured substantial amount. We estimate WHO that there's a need only for the health over the coming 3 months of 50 million, of these 30 million in supplies. And WHO and all the health partners are working on it. Lynn Hastings already informed about the overall needs: fuel, water, sanitation, food, essential medical supplies, and of course not non-food items for the shelter. And there was a flash appeal of over 250 million, which is currently being substantially updated and expanded, focus on the total Gaza population. I want to say and end with one story. We have a team in Gaza, and that team is still remarkably operational. We established a warehouse. We're distributing these medical supplies and goods. There's more coming in, which we want to distribute as quickly as possible. His team is a team of seasoned medical doctors. They've gone through multiple escalations of war in Gaza. They were part, and they're facilitating. We do this, the whole distribution through WHO. They visited all these hospitals, Shiva, Al-Quds, the 5 hospitals in the south. They were devastated. They've never seen these scenes before in all their lives. They told a story that, for example, the operation theater supplies, they were ripped off the trucks and directly brought into the operation theaters. We all heard stories. They've seen that. There's images of that. All the patients actually are operated in corridors without anesthetics. Patients on life support, which normally should be in ICUs, at the corridors. There is a shortage of everything. As my colleague said, the smell of death, the stench and the smell of death is everywhere. And he sees dead children all over, dead and injured children all over the place. He was personally devastated, etc., and had never seen this in Gaza before. I want to leave it there. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this. I'm seeing already people asking for the notes, so I don't know if Tariq and Ishita can help us with this. And I'll now go to Ravina Shamdasani for OHCHR, also on OPT.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk is appealing to all sides to heed the calls for peace. The violence needs to end, and there need to be strong efforts to seek an alternative to this carnage. For almost 3 weeks now, Palestinian civilians in Gaza have endured relentless bombing by Israel from air, land, and sea. Thousands killed, lying dead among destroyed residential buildings, mosques, and bakeries. We receive harrowing testimonies of entire families killed by airstrikes on their homes, including the families of our own staff members, of parents writing children's names on their arms to identify their future remains, of the terrifying sleepless nights people are spending in open air as airstrikes continue overhead. We mourn the loss of UN colleagues and so many more civilians who are clearly disproportionately impacted. Despite its repeated orders to residents of northern Gaza to move to the south, suggesting it is safe, Israeli forces' strikes on 2 southern governorates and middle Gaza have intensified in recent days. Meanwhile, heavy strikes on northern communities, including in Gaza City, continue. Nowhere is safe in Gaza. Compelling people to evacuate in these circumstances, including to places such as the Israeli designated area of Al-Mawasi, and while under a complete siege, raises serious concerns over forcible transfer, which is a war crime. Israel's use of explosive weapons with wide area effects in densely populated areas has caused extensive damage to civilian infrastructure and loss of civilian lives that, by all appearances, is difficult to reconcile with international humanitarian law. Collective punishment is occurring through the choking off of water, food, fuel, and electricity. Fuel shortages forcing the closure of hospitals and bakeries, people forced into shelters in increasingly dire conditions, overcrowded with poor sanitation and unsafe drinking water, bringing forward the specter of disease outbreak. A humanitarian catastrophe unfolds for the 2.2 million people locked inside Gaza who are being collectively punished. Collective punishment is a war crime. Israel's collective punishment of the entire population of Gaza must immediately cease. The use of dehumanizing language against Palestinians must also be halted. Indiscriminate attacks by Palestinian armed groups, including through the launching of unguided rockets into Israel, must stop. They must immediately and unconditionally release all civilians who were captured and are still being held. The taking of hostages is also a war crime. The High Commissioner is appealing for efforts to seek human rights-based, lasting pathways towards peace for the people of Palestine and Israel. Efforts must be made to bring this escalation to an immediate end. It is of utmost importance that all those with influence negotiate a way out of this protracted, disastrous situation. Peace, security, and justice will not be found down this current path. The cycle of vengeance and bloodshed needs to end.
Thank you very much, Ravina, and thanks to Samer and Dr. Richard Peppercorn for the briefings. I've got quite a few questions, but just to start, maybe Dr. Peppercorn, the journalists are asking in the chat, you said 35,000 liters of fuel are needed to keep how many hospitals running? Could you just confirm this as a start, and then I go to the questions?
Yeah, it's 94,000 liters of fuel per day are needed to keep 12 major hospitals and on a minimum requirement needed to keep their critical functions. So 12 major referral hospitals.
Thank you very much. Very clear. Okay, let me start with the questions in the room. If there is any, I don't see. So let's go. Yes, sorry. Gabriela, our Mexican journalist from Proceso. Gabriela.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, Ravina. If you can elaborate, I know it's hard for you to talk about this, but about UN personnel that have been killed. What are the conditions of UN personnel there? If you can elaborate on that. And also to Alessandra, we heard that Israel banned UN personnel and they are not allowing visas for UN personnel. Can you confirm that? Is that true? Why is that measure? I mean, if you can explain. Thank you so much.
Need to start? Yeah. Okay, so let me take your question, Gabriela. Mrs. Hastings, that has spoken to the journalist just before, has been answering this question. She said that for the moment they continue discussing with the Israeli authorities. They don't seem to have had yet an impact of this announced issue of the visa. What the Secretary General spokesperson said yesterday is that the discussions are continuing through the normal channels with Israeli officials in order to get the visas that are needed for UN staff. And this is for the moment what we know about the visa issue. And maybe you want to answer Gabriela's first question, Ravina.
Thanks, Gabriela. I mean, that would be a question for all the other UN officials. Of course, you know, many of us have staff in Gaza, and particularly UNRWA, of course. On the conditions that staff are living under, I mean, we're not able to talk to them very much, given the communication issues. And, you know, mobile phone batteries are a real commodity these days. Charging them is not easy. But one of our staff members had 20 family members who've been killed so far. Another one, 18. Another one said there were 50 of his extended family who had already been killed. Many of them are sleeping out in the open. It's a difficult decision to make whether you want to sleep indoors, whether you'll be better protected indoors or outside. You have to make calculations about whether a ceiling collapsing on you or being hit by shrapnel is more likely to happen. So this is what our staff is experiencing. You hear air raids in the background when you're speaking to them. One of our staff members talked about a 13-year-old son who has stopped talking. That's how bad the situation is, of course.
And of course, Samer and Richard, if you want to add anything on the conditions in which your staff is, the staff of WFP and WHO is operating. I see Richard is nodding. Maybe you want to have the floor on this.
I just want to add, because I think Lynn and also my colleague from OHR actually clarified already. Of course, I think we have a team of 26 staff in Gaza, and we get all the same information just referred to by our OHR colleague. I also want to say what is incredibly remarkable. So a number of our team is still fully operational and actually part of what we are doing and what we need to continue to do to distribute essential medical supplies, essential medicines. And also we want to distribute the fuel to those key hospitals where it's so much needed. So first of all, I mean, like the bravery, and they're taking risks, because I think it was been mentioned by Lynn Hastings as well. There is no safe place in Gaza. So we hear exactly all the same stories. We have, of course, our internal groups, etc., and we hear the same, the horrible stories, that like everyone, like every Gaza, probably emotionally drains for many reasons. People lost family, lost friends, lost neighbors, etc. Those stories. But I want to also really speak out that I'm so proud of the team, which actually is still operational and doing the right thing. Over to you.
Maybe Samer, you want to add something too?
Yeah, thanks. I think my colleagues mentioned it very well. From WFP side, what I can say is that many staff who actually sought refuge or in the shelter in the south, Khan Yunis training facility, at one point they had to find other places simply because 25,000 people were almost sharing 8 toilets. That's the shelter conditions that we're looking at, overcrowded. So they're having to struggle to find even food for themselves, water. Many of them are really, really traumatized. They lost family members. And I can say that, like, they're courageous, they're brave, because even when they're able to communicate with us, which is very rare, they are asking, how can we help? Knowing that they lost some of their family members, etc., they want to help. And I think this is showing the resilience, if you want, of the people in Gaza that want to have a better life.
Indeed. Thank you very much to our colleagues. So I'll go now to Emma Farch, our correspondent of Reuters.
Thank you. A question for WFP, please. I wanted to clarify on the 9 trucks you said crossed today. The UN coordinator said it was 8 in total. So I'm just confused. Can you clarify that? Also, can you say more about pre-positioning aid outside of Gaza? How much have you pre-positioned and where? And also for WHO, I'd like to know how much aid is currently waiting at the Rafah crossing or at other borders with Gaza, please. Thank you.
Thank you. We take one question after the other. So Samer.
Yeah, I think just to clarify, I was talking about the food trucks that managed to make it since the 21st of October. Those are the 9 trucks I was referring to that belongs to WFP. I wasn't talking about the number of trucks that made it in today, which is only 8 so far. On the pre-positioning, we have almost 40 trucks ready to go in, around 1,000 metric tons of food that is actually in El Arish and close to the Rafah borders. We have also food in Israel and the West Bank that is ready to go in once the borders are or the crossings are open and allowed us to go in. And there is many more that is basically on the pipeline to be sourced to those two routes.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I didn't understand the part of the question was to me as well, but for WHO. So the whole first consignment of 51 pallets that have been distributed, as I have explained. We have another consignment now in Gaza, and there's 3-4 more flights actually have been arriving in Al Arish and are unloading and are ready to get in as well. So then we talk, of course, about the most essential trauma supplies. We talk about also, I mean, really important essential medicines for non-communicable diseases, essential drugs for what we call primary healthcare, reproductive, maternal, and child health, everything related to that. And they are, so part of them are already in Gaza, which we plan to distribute as quickly as possible, currently being offloaded and actually included in our warehouse and being distributed, we hope, as quickly as possible over this weekend to, again, prioritize referral hospitals. It also includes tents and water tanks. Over to you. But I want to... Okay.
Please go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, and maybe Samar has addressed that, and others have addressed it. We're talking about a drop of an ocean in the ocean. It's we should talk about a sustained supply. We talk about, we hear about 15, 20, 40 trucks. Samar is better aware of that as leading logistic cluster. We should talk about hundreds of trucks in a sustained way, and not only to Gaza, but also within Gaza. Within Gaza, we need, whatever you call it, safe passages, humanitarian corridors, etc., to make sure that this goods can come in. We know that many partners are lined up. ICRC has lined up 12 trucks, for example, with essential supplies. There's many bilateral agencies who lined up their supplies in all areas. We need to coordinate that, we need to prioritize that, but most importantly, we need to distribute it as quickly as possible to the shelters, the makeshift shelters, to the bakeries, but specifically also, of course, to the health facilities all over Gaza, and to the population wherever they reside in Gaza. We should not only talk about south of Wadi Gaza, also about the remaining population and the remaining IDPs. For your information, only in Shifa Hospital, there's an estimated 40,000 IDPs staying in Shifa Hospital, with 5,000 within the hospital and 30,000 in the compounds. Same at Al-Quds Hospital, you talk about 12,000 IDPs, because people consider hospitals as safe places, Indonesian hospitals, etc. They all have a huge number of IDPs. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Yuri Aprilev, correspondent of RIA Novosti. Yuri.
Yes, thank you, Alessandra. I have two questions. One is for Ravina, and the second is for the representative of WFP and WHO in Jerusalem. So Ravina, the permanent representative of Palestine in Geneva told us yesterday that he's asking Volker Türk to request a list of the identities of the victims of October 7th from Israel. I will citing him in order to establish a climate of trust in the figures of victims presented publicly. Has this appeal been heard by Volker Türk? Has the list been requested or already reserved? This is the first for Ravina, and the second for WFP and WHO. You are in Jerusalem yourself. How are the Israeli authorities reacting to your comments? Did they understand what you are talking about and the problem you are talking? Thank you.
Thanks for that. The High Commissioner is in touch with the Israeli authorities, with the Palestinian Permanent Mission here as well, in fact. He's had meetings with them. He also met with some of the families of those who have been held by Hamas when they visited Geneva. So he's very much engaged on this issue. And really our hearts go out to the families of those who must be just feeling so terrified, unclear what the fate of their loved ones is, the people who are still being held in Gaza. And we have called for their unconditional, immediate release. On bilateral exchanges between the High Commissioner and the authorities, those will remain bilateral. We will share with you anything public we're able to share.
Thank you. I don't know, Samir or Richard, who wants to start? Richard?
Okay, I will start. I think when I listened to part of the former press conference with Lynn Hastings, the Humanitarian Coordinator, I think she partly addressed this already. I think there's, within the one UN, there's definitely an ongoing dialogue also with Israeli authorities, where we are also part of. Secondly, I mean, like our sit reps, the WHO sit reps, all the information is public. We share that, so everyone is aware of what we actually produce, what we develop, and what we are doing. Over to you.
Tamer?
Yeah, I think it's addressed by Rick very well, and that's our position. What I can say is that the needs are much higher than what's going in, and this is the reality on the ground. 2%, this is what I was referring to. 2%, the 9 trucks that WFP entered represent 2% of what is needed actually, or what was going into Gaza prior to the crisis. If you want to meet the demands at the moment and the humanitarian needs on the ground, we need around 40 trucks a day of food to be able to reach 1 million people. If you want to reach the whole population in Gaza, we need 100 trucks of food alone every day. And that is the situation we're in, where we're ready, but we need to make sure that that scaled up continuous access into Gaza is one thing. And the second thing, on the ground, we need to make sure that we are able to operate and reach the people wherever they are to be able to support their needs.
Thank you very much. Jamil Shade, our Brazilian correspondent of UOL.
Yes, my question is to WHO. It is also on the numbers of the 7,000 that you put actually in your report as well on deaths. I know you mentioned the Ministry of Health, but could you tell us for how long have you relied on the Ministry of Health in Gaza? How comfortable are you using those numbers? And what is the basically possibility that these numbers could be wrong?
Richard?
Yeah, I think this is partly, I think, addressed by Lynn Hastings already, I think, in the former session. So as WHO, in every conflict, in any outbreak, in any emergency, yeah, this also, for example, was very much happening with COVID-19. You might have forgotten that. We rely on the data of the relevant health authorities. So Lynn Hastings made it clear, the Ministry of Health in Gaza, confirmed by the Ministry of Health in Ramallah. Yeah, so I want to make that clear. Now, yesterday, WHO received a list of the casualties from the Ministry of Health, detailing names of all the people, registration number, who have been killed from the 7th of October. So I'm talking about a list from between 7th to 26th of October. That is 6,747 people, and it doesn't include 281 unidentified persons. I also want to stress, we also get these estimates that there are still 1,000 plus people under the rubble, which have not been identified yet. And I must say, I also find this a little bit of a cynical question, which is coming back and back. So if it would be 1,000 more or 1,000 less, I mean, would the discussion change? And my last point I want to say, the Ministry of Health in Palestine, when we deal, for example, we've been dealing with them for decades, and we look at other figures, if it is immunization and other figures, they have a pretty good vital statistics, death, birth, but also for areas like immunization. And yes, we have been, of course, in some of those areas in the past, we do also our assessment and surveys. And I can say they were pretty good. Over to you.
Thank you very much for these wise words. Moussa Assi, Al-Mayedine.
Merci, Alessandra. J'ai deux questions en fait, une pour Ravina et une pour vous. Je ne sais pas pour vous si je pose maintenant ou bien à la fin concernant ce qui se passait au Conseil de droits de l'homme. Je commence avec Ravina. Ravina, the Palestinian representative informed us yesterday that more than 1,000 Palestinian workers working in Israel were arrested by Israeli forces after October 7. Can you confirm this? And if you have some information about their situation? Alexandre pose ma question maintenant ou bien après?
Oui, allez-y, puisque c'est relatif à
oui,
notre
alors,
sujet.
lundi passé, il y a eu un incident au Conseil de droits de l'homme. La sécurité, ou bien un membre de la sécurité, a voulu sortir un parlementaire européen de la salle parce qu'il portait une châle avec un petit drapeau palestinien. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer ce qui s'est passé Et pourquoi est-ce que c'est interdit de porter ce genre de choses dans la salle de droits de l'homme? Et donc, il s'est passé quoi aussi avec le membre de la sécurité qui a voulu sortir ce parlementaire? Merci.
Merci, Ravina. You want to start?
Yeah, thanks for that, Musa. Yes, we do have reports of Palestinian workers being arrested, detained in Israel. I'm trying to find if we have figures on that, but I'll have to come back to you. We may have them, but I don't have them in front of me right now, so I will come back to you on that. But yes, we do have reports of Palestinian workers being detained in Israel.
Moussa, merci pour votre question sur ce qui s'est passé dans la salle 20. J'ai effectivement vérifié avec nos collègues. En fait, ce n'est pas exactement comme vous avez décrit. Ce que je peux vous confirmer, c'est qu'avant tout, la personne en question avait un badge ONG. Il n'était pas un délégué d'un gouvernement, d'une autorité. Il était accrédité comme représentant d'une ONG. Ça, c'est juste pour préciser un premier détail. Deuxièmement, la sécurité n'est pas intervenue pendant la réunion et n'a pas sorti la personne de la salle, disons, manu militari, mais il s'est agi de, en fait, tout simplement une question qui a été posée à la personne en question, où l'agent de sécurité a juste demandé est-ce qu'on peut sortir en seconde. La personne en question est sortie sans problème. Ils ont eu une discussion de 1 minute dans laquelle la personne de la sécurité, le collègue de la sécurité a demandé à cette représentante d'ONG quel était l'habillement qu'il avait. Il a vu de quoi il s'agissait. Il lui a dit merci beaucoup. Le monsieur est rentré dans la salle et l'agent de sécurité a déféré aux organisateurs de la réunion des éventuelles discussions. Voilà, ça c'est ce que j'ai pu avoir comme information. Oui, pardon, vas-y.
No, so Musa, I still don't have the figures, but I do have information. I mean, there has been, our colleagues have documented an increase in arbitrary arrests of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and of Arab Israelis in Israel, including Palestinian activists and Palestinian workers that were previously working in Israel. We have reports of ill treatment, of cancellation of work permits, and the lack of any due process. This, of course, is unacceptable.
Merci Ravina pour ces précisions. Ravikant, Washington Trade Daily.
Yeah, my question is to Ravina. Ravina, is the situation being so grave? Is it right to say this is a genocide that is happening before our eyes?
This question was also asked by Mohammed this morning.
No, sure. Thanks for the question. I know that there are accusations flying of all sorts of legal qualifications of what is going on right now in Gaza. As I said quite clearly in our briefing note, we are concerned that war crimes are being committed. We're concerned about the collective punishment of Gazans in response to the atrocious attacks by Hamas, which also amounted to war crimes. Our analysis at this point, it can't go further than that on the qualification of other crimes. They really need to be done by a court of law through an independent process. And we understand that the ICC is also engaged in the matter.
Thank you very much. Gabriel, I've seen you, but I've got still people queuing on the platform, sorry. So I'll go to John Zarocostas, France 24 and The Lancet.
Yes, good morning. Firstly, my question to Richard, and I have a question for Ravina. Richard, can you bring us up to speed, please? What's the situation with reference to referrals of urgent patients, life-threatening situations where they need to go to specialized treatment? Rick Brennan a few days ago told us that was not possible to get referrals anymore out of Gaza or the West Bank to other places. Is that still the situation? And what are the Israeli authorities telling you with reference to that? Is there some improvement of opening channels? And I have a question for Ravina afterwards.
Yeah, John, go ahead. Ask Ravina also so that afterwards we can go to the answers.
Ravina, with reference to my colleague's questions earlier, the Human Rights Monitors has the office got in the OPT in West Bank and also in Gaza? Because Ms. Hastings told us only your head of mission has a visa to go in and out from Amman into the OPT. So how many nationals do you have working for your office? In other words, you're in a position to document any alleged violations by all sides.
Thank you, John. Let's start with Richard.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe I should have mentioned that, etc. So based on the visits from our team also to the hospitals, distributing the supplies, and of course the coordination with the hospital, the medical specialists, medical directors at hospitals, as the Ministry of Health. So only in Shifa, we already were getting this report that approximately over 100 critical patients urgently need to be evacuated. Now, if you then look at the whole of Gaza, I would say probably talk at least 200, probably plus. It's difficult to make those assessments because it's very difficult for the people to move and get this information. The second point was the second question. So, but I would say 200 plus. The second point is, are we allowed to do that? I think we raised this already. There's very few supplies coming in. There's no people yet going out, including no critical injured or very sick patients. So this is not happening. What is happening, that with the government of Egypt and WHO, we very much involved our regional office, our country office in Egypt. So the Egyptian government is ready to take up those critical, urgently and critical patients in their hospitals close to Rafah, but also in many other locations. Over to you.
Ravina?
Thanks, John. Yes, following what Lynn Hastings said, we do have staff. We have 10 national staff in Gaza. You asked about how much they're able to monitor the situation. It's difficult. I just described their circumstances, the conditions in which they're living. They are being forced to flee from one location to another, trying to take some time to mourn the loss of loved ones, but not really having that luxury in these circumstances. So we have 10 of them, 10 of our national staff in Gaza. They're trying to continue their work given the circumstances. We also have 25 staff in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and 15 international staff. Most of them are based in Amman. Lynn Hastings already mentioned to you the visa issues that we've had.
Thank you. Imogen Fox, BBC.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit confused about this fuel. Is any fuel coming in? WHO, I know, says you need it desperately. Can you give the clearer picture of what the situation is?
Maybe I'll give the floor to Richard and then to Samir on this. Richard?
I think Samir is a better place to actually address this question. It was also addressed partly by Lynn Hastings already. Samir, over to you.
Thanks. I think from the trucks that went in, 74 trucks went in so far as of this morning through Rafah border. None of them has fuel. So that's the information that I have. The amounts that were in the UNRWA depot, I think we had to work, all of us as a humanitarian country team, to see how we can prioritize the needs. Rick talked about the hospitals. For us, we worked on how much we can source to the bakeries that are contracted with us. UNICEF, we're talking about the water desalination plants. So it's very, very scarce. And that's why we were saying that from a food system perspective, we are expecting it to completely collapse if fuel does not go in. And that includes the bakeries, the mills, the wholesalers. Whoever had some stocks of food is not able actually to source it to the shops, simply because there is not sufficient fuel for the trucks to operate in Gaza. And the risk that we're looking at, even if we have more trucks coming in from the Rafah crossing, we don't have enough fuel inside Gaza that allows us to actually do the transshipment and move the food from Rafah crossing into the UN warehouses.
Thank you very much. Let me go back to Gabriela, to the room, to Gabriela. Gabriela is our Mexican journalist from Proceso.
Thank you very much. Ravina, I heard reports that 50 hostages died from Israeli bombings. do you have information about this? 2 Mexicans are among the hostages. That's the reason I'm asking. And then I read that Mr. Putin received members of Hamas to promote a 2-state solution. Do you think that with this spirit of peace, Mr. Putin will put a stop to the invasion in Ukraine or seek a peaceful agreement there? Thank you very much.
On the reports that you refer to, no, we don't have we don't have information. We don't have the ability to verify those at this point. And on attempts at peace, as we have said, we call on all states with influence to use that influence to push for a de-escalation, to push for an end to the violence, an end to the hostilities. The Secretary General has been very clear on the political solution to this conflict. There can be no solution through war. It only leads to more death and destruction. So we call on all states with influence in the matter to exercise their influence, not to encourage an escalation, but rather to seek a de-escalation of the situation. As far as Ukraine is concerned, we're receiving daily reports of potential violations of international human rights law and international humanitarian law. And in fact, we might have a report that we'll be putting out on Tuesday here.
Thank you very much, and thanks for this information. I don't see other questions. Oh, yes, Gabriela, you have a follow-up?
I have a question on another subject for Ravina, if it's
Yeah, Ravina is going to brief you on something else. So let me close the issue, the briefing on the situation in the Middle East. I'd like to thank very, very much Samira Abdel-Jaber, the WFP Country Director for Palestine, and Dr. Richard Pieperkorn, WHO representative in OPTs, who both brief you from Jerusalem. And of course, Tariq and also Ishita, if they can follow up with the notes, that would be much appreciated. Thanks again, and good luck with your important work, and stay safe. And I'll go now back to Ravina. Ravina, you had another point, and it was about the Afghan refugees, and maybe afterwards, Gabriela, you'll be able to ask your question. So let's go to Ravina with this other item.
Right. We are extremely alarmed by Pakistan's announcement that it plans to deport, quote unquote, undocumented foreign nationals remaining in the country after the 1st of November, a measure that will disproportionately impact more than 1.4 million undocumented Afghans who remain in Pakistan. There are more than 2 million undocumented Afghans living in Pakistan, at least 600,000 of whom left Afghanistan after the Taliban takeover in August 2021. We believe many of those facing deportation will be at grave risk of human rights violations if returned to Afghanistan, including arbitrary arrest and detention, torture, cruel, and other inhuman treatment. Those at particular risk are the following: civil society activists, journalists, human rights defenders, former government officials and security forces members, and of course, women and girls as a whole. Women and girls, as a result of the abhorrent policies currently in place in Afghanistan, are banned from secondary and tertiary education, working in many sectors and other aspects of daily and public life. Already, the UN Refugee Agency and IOM have documented a sharp increase in returns to Afghanistan since the deadline was announced on the 3rd of October. A recent flash report by UNHCR and IOM placed the number of Afghans who've left Pakistan in this month until 15th October to 59,780 individuals. 78% of those returning cited fear of arrest as the reason for leaving Pakistan. As the 1st of November deadline approaches, we urge the Pakistani authorities to suspend forcible returns of Afghan nationals before it is too late to avoid a human rights catastrophe. We call on them to continue providing protection to those in need and to ensure that any future returns are safe, dignified, and voluntary, and fully consistent with international law. Deportations without individualized determination of personal circumstances, including mass deportations, would amount to refoulement in violation of international human rights law, in particular the Convention Against Torture, to which Pakistan is a party, and of international refugee law. As winter approaches, any mass deportations are bound to deepen the dire humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan as it grapples with the devastating impact of a series of earthquakes that struck Herat province this month, leaving at least 1,400 people dead and 1,800 injured, as per official figures. According to OCHA, close to 30 million people are currently in need of relief assistance in Afghanistan, out of a population of 43 million. We remind the de facto authorities of the international human rights obligations that continue to bind Afghanistan as a state and their obligation to protect and promote and fulfill human rights.
Thank you very much, Ravina. Any question, Ravina, on this matter in the room? I don't see any. Lisa Schlein on the platform.
Good morning. Oh God, this is really depressing morning. Ravina, is there anybody monitoring the deportation, the forced deportation of Afghans from Pakistan in Afghanistan itself? I mean, do you have people on the ground there? And I'm wondering what your major concerns are when they return. Do you know whether they are being arrested, whether they are being harassed in any way, tortured, or is it mainly the awful conditions that reign in the country itself, the ongoing violations, the discrimination against people, particularly what's happening to women and so forth, that is concern for you, that somehow or other sending them back is, I don't know how to put it, but I mean, it's just in this a country that has such terrible conditions that they can't possibly have any sort of a viable, meaningful life there. Thank you.
Ravina, maybe we have also Matthew Saltmarsh from UNHCR in case he wants to add something to that. Ravina.
Yes, I will defer to UNHCR colleagues on some of this as well. But Lisa, in fact, you've answered the question very well yourself. We are very worried that those who are deported face a whole host of human rights violations, torture, arbitrary detention, severe discrimination, lack of access to basic economic, social needs. In particular, women, who of course are being the attempt is to completely erase them from any public presence in society, from the workplace, from schools, from even public parks. So we are worried that deportations will be cruel, and they are a clear violation of both international human rights law and international refugee law.
Matt?
Yeah, maybe I can just add a quick word. We put out a statement with the IOM on the 7th of October on this issue, so I can refer you to that. But in addition to that, Lisa, of course, we've appealed to Pakistan to continue its protection of all vulnerable Afghans who have sought safety in the country and could be at imminent risk if forced to return. Afghanistan, as we just heard, is going through a severe humanitarian crisis with several human rights challenges, particularly for women and girls, and that's not to mention the series of natural disasters that we've recently seen. Any deportations would have serious implications for all who have been forced to leave the country, and they may face serious protection risks upon their return. Of course, we appreciate the generous hospitality of countries in the region towards Afghan nationals for over 4 decades, despite the challenges, and we repeat the call for all returns to be voluntary, safe, and dignified without any pressure to ensure protection for those seeking safety.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you very much. Lisa has a follow-up.
Yeah, and now both of you, I mean, your organizations clearly are in conversation with the Pakistani authorities about this situation. What does the government say to you? How does it justify the deportation of all of these people? I mean, as you say, they have been generous for a long time. It's a big burden and so forth, but nonetheless, there are all of these risks. So yeah, how do they justify the deportation of these people? And then would you, Matt, be so kind as to resend your press release of October 7th? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa.
Matt, you want to start?
Yeah, thank you. I can certainly resend the press release. Lisa, I don't have any details of the conversations so far and any possible positioning by the Pakistani authorities. Let me see if I can get you a little bit more detail later in the day. But for now, all I have is what we've given there. But I'll send any notes through to you now.
You want to add something, right?
Lisa, yes, of course, we have raised our concerns with the authorities. And in fact, you had asked earlier if we're present in Afghanistan. Yes, we are. We have a human rights section in the UN presence in Afghanistan, in UNAMA, and they are continuing to monitor the human rights situation there. And it is on the basis of their monitoring that we are raising these concerns about the use of torture, arbitrary detention, and the severely discriminatory policies that people who are returned to Afghanistan will face.
Thank you very much. And before I let Ravina go, Gabriela, you had another question, right?
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to ask all that questions, but for you, Ravina, and perhaps for Alexandra on Venezuela, the Secretary General asked the Maduro government to respect Barbados agreements so that free and transparent elections are held in 2024. Maria Corina Machado, one of the strongest opposition candidates, has been the target of attacks by the Maduro government. It is not clear if she will be able to run because apparently she has been disqualified. So are you worried that something similar to what happened in Nicaragua with the opposition will happen with the opposition in Venezuela? Something like that? Are you worried that free elections are not being held? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. What I can tell you is that the Secretary General is closely following the developments in Venezuela. He has been calling on the authorities to guarantee full adherence and respect for the political and electoral rights of all citizens. And he reiterates his call to implement in good faith the partial agreement on the promotion of political rights and electoral guarantees for all that was signed in Barbados just a few days ago on 17th of October, and on which he also made a statement. I don't know if you want to add something on that, Ravina?
I mean, of course, the High Commissioner would very much echo the Secretary General's statement. We are aware of the reports that you're referring to, and we have received allegations of some intimidation, censorship, and other worrying concerns that have been raised. Our presence in Caracas continues to work on its protection and technical cooperation activities on the ground, and it has been meeting with different actors in this regard.
And I guess this is also the same subject, Maria Alejandra.
Yes, thank you, Alessandra. Indeed, it is. It's a related issue. I would like to see if there's any possibility of having some context on what's going on, and second, if this is related with the statement that was given by the Secretary General, the announcement he made a few weeks ago with regards to the creation of a fund to alleviate the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. Are these two issues related in any way? Thank you.
I'm looking at Ravina. Ravina is looking at me. I'm not sure we understand what you mean with related. But obviously, what happened at that point also concerned Venezuela, so it is related. And now it's important, as the Secretary General said, that these commitments are implemented. Ravina, would you like to add something?
No, not really, Alessandra. Yeah, no, just again, reiterating what Alessandra said. I would actually refer you, the High Commissioner visited Venezuela in January, where he met with President Maduro, civil society actors, really a wide range of actors across Venezuelan society. He heard a lot of the concerns we have. We are, of course, present on the ground. So hearing a lot of reports of what's going on. I would also like to refer you to his statement, which in fact was very comprehensive, and it raised concerns along the lines of what's occurring now.
I see Maria Alejandra as her hand up. Maybe she wants to clarify.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Alessandra. What I meant was that the fund to alleviate the humanitarian crisis was signed in another partial agreement in Mexico, and it had been held for some time. Its implementation, its implementation had been held for some time, and then the agreement in Barbados kicked off the possibility of creating this fund. This is my understanding. So I just wanted to know if the fact that the Venezuelan government is not adhering to that agreement signed in Barbados could have any influence in the setting up of this fund. That was my question. Sorry for.
Okay, I understand better. Look, I can try and get you some more information. I know that when these developments happened, the Secretary General commended the efforts of the regional and international partners and encouraged the implementation in good faith of these agreements. The scope being to lead to inclusive, transparent, and credible elections next year, as he said, and also to address human rights concern. But on the consequences of this on the fund, I don't have a specific answer. We'll see if we can get you more, or maybe there will be more in the next days. So I think we can now free Ravina. Thank you very much for all the various briefings. And I'm sure the notes are already out there, or will be very soon, very, very soon. And let me turn to my left. Sophie, we have the pleasure to have you. It's not often that you come and visit us, but you have an announcement on CITES standing committee meeting upcoming. Please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, after speaking about human and humanitarian disaster, speak a little bit about the biodiversity disaster, which is also part of the planetary crisis on climate change, loss of biodiversity and pollution. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora is gathering in Geneva the week after next, from the 6th to 10th of November. It will be the first time that a convention meeting is held since we had a big meeting in Panama in November of last year. This meeting is important, not only because of a lot of issues being on the agenda, but also because a lot of parties and organizations are going to come. We're expecting over 600 participants from 90 countries or parties to the convention, and over 100 organizations, which is a record number for a convention, for a meeting of the standing committee, which only has actually 20 members. So all the others are coming to provide information and assist the committee itself. And we have never had this many parties to a standing committee meeting before. And it's probably linked to the fact that some of the agenda items are quite maybe I wouldn't say controversial, but quite important, in that the committee will discuss compliance matters with relating to over 25 parties. For instance, with relating to Bangladesh with respect to illegal trade in live birds, Cameroon with respect to the management and trade of African tech, China with regard to trade in live Asian elephants for commercial purposes, which is not allowed under the convention. European Union with respect to the way they implement the provisions of the Convention on Trade in Captive Bred Specimens, which are included in the most strict appendix of the Convention, Appendix 1, where you're normally not supposed to trade for commercial purposes, except if they're captive bred, but under certain conditions that we are arguing the European Union are not following. There will also be discussions of compliance cases in Guinea, Nigeria, Laos, People's Democratic Republic, and Democratic Republic of the Congo. With respect to Guinea, the Secretariat recently traveled to the country and discovered a massive traffic of rosewood from Guinea to China in violation of the convention. So this will be brought to the attention of the committee. The committee will also be discussing illegal trade in big cats, in particular tigers, illegal totoaba fishing in the Mexican Gulf, which is threatening the survival of the vaquita species in that area, which is really on the brink of extinction. We know that there are only 10 left of this little porpoise in the Mexican Gulf. It's stable, but it's only 10, which is not a significant population to make sure that it survives. There is also a massive issue of trade from West Africa and rosewood. Guinea is one of the countries, but all the range states in West Africa of this species, there are 16 of them, face difficulties in managing this and controlling this trade and ensuring that it happens at a sustainable level. As usual, the committee will discuss elephants, but will also this time discuss the potential role of CITES in preventing zoonotic disease spillover, which of course we know had caused the COVID pandemic, and we're trying to see if there's something that the convention can do to contribute to preventing a new occurrence of this. And finally, there are a number of broader issues relating to how to engage indigenous peoples, local communities, women and youth better in our work of the convention, and how the convention is contributing to the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework that was adopted in 2022 in Montreal, December 2022. Mike has distributed a press release that we just issued this morning in the 3 languages. Media representatives are welcome to come to the event as long as they make themselves known in advance, so we can check their credentials and have them registered. We also have some guidelines in terms of how you participate in the meeting with filming, etc. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you very much for this briefing. Let me see if there's any question, Gabriela.
Yes, thank you very much. Is the committee are going to review whether the government of Mexico has made any progress regarding the protection of the vaquita marina that is in danger of extinction? Yeah, thanks.
So this has been on the agenda for the committee for some years, and at the last meeting of the committee in November of 2022, Mexico was requested to produce an action plan with targets and milestones, etc., and that the Secretariat would have to agree was sufficient to address the issues. And this happened I think in April of this year. And so this meeting will then further address how Mexico has implemented this action plan and whether the actions taken are sufficient to combat this illegal trade in totoaba in order to save the vaquita. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. A question from Michel Langrand, Geneva Solutions.
Yes, thank you, Alessandra. I was wondering what will be sort of, once these cases are discussed during the meeting, what will follow, what type of decisions should we expect, and what are the implications for the countries that are found to be not in compliance with the agreements? Thank you.
Thank you. A very good question that I had thought of whether I should address right away. It really depends on the specific case, the specific issues. The recommendations that have been proposed by the Secretariat will be discussed by the Standing Committee, and they will agree. In certain cases, the Secretariat has proposed that the country can no longer participate in trade in species, in the 40,000 species listed on the convention. This is the case, for instance, for Lao PDR, because Lao PDR has not been sufficiently responding to recommendations that have been made over the past couple of years. In other situations, it remains to be seen what the outcome will be, but most of the time, the Standing Committee will come with quite specific recommendations as to what the party must do in order to address its compliance matters. Quite, in the case of the European Union, for instance, there's a question of whether European Union must register the facilities that are producing captive bred specimens of Appendix 1 species, and whether they must be registered with the Secretariat or not. And this is a decision that the committee must make, because normally that's what is recommended, that all these facilities are registered with the Secretariat, but we don't we don't know yet whether the committee will accept that recommendation. There are also recommendations with respect to both Laos and PDR in China that they should stop the trade in live Asian elephants for commercial purposes. So these are the types of conclusions that the Standing Committee may agree on. Thank you.
Michelle, you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you for your answer. I'm just wondering if there's somewhere where we can find these recommendations from the Secretariat, just more information about what's going to be discussed in more detail. Thank you.
So all the documents are available on our website. There are about 100 documents, and all these discussions on compliance matters are at item 33. So you'll find the detailed analysis of the Secretariat and the recommendations under the documents that are included under item 33. Another perhaps easier way for you to get more information is to look at information document number 8. So you go on citus.org and information documents, and information document number 8 summarizes all the agenda items and spells out all the recommendations that the Secretariat has made for the consideration of the Standing Committee. So that's probably the easiest way to get this information about the matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Is there any other question for CITES? I don't see any. Thank you very much for announcing us this important meeting. I know the news are very difficult, very terrible at the moment, but wildlife is very important too. So yes, thank you very much for briefing us on this. I have another briefing to give, for you on behalf of FAO. Key was not available, but she asked me to inform you that FAO is organizing a media breakfast on the 2nd of November, next Thursday at 9 a.m. For the upcoming launch of the State of Food and Agriculture 2023. The report is under embargo and will be released on the 6th November at 9 a.m. However, please consider that there will not be press conferences in Rome, although the report will be launched there on the 6th of November, but it will be launched at an event that will be open to all stakeholders. But the press are really invited to come to this media breakfast, for which we will have the pleasure to have you briefed by the FAO Chief Economist Massimo Torero. He will be there to answer your questions under embargo, of course, as the report is until the 6th. But as I said, this will be basically the only occasion where the FAO main author of the report will be able to share the findings of the report with the journalists, and there are also opportunities for one-to-one interviews afterwards. Just a word on the report that will be about the true cost of food, and will touch on the hidden costs that are not reflected in the market prices, which are associated with a range of impacts, including environmental damage, undernutrition and related health consequences, and underdevelopment and derivative social impacts. I understand from Key that I will give you the information about the report in advance so that you can actually ask informed questions to Mr. Torero when he comes to Geneva. We're really happy because he is coming just for that, to brief you on this occasion. I also have a couple of press conferences to announce you. By the way, sorry, I forgot to say, Key has sent you an invitation to the media breakfast so that you will find it in your mailbox. ITU is holding a press conference on Thursday, 2nd of November. That's at 10:30, so just after the FAO media breakfast. The subject is the World Radio Communication Conference 2023, and the speaker will be Joanne Wilson, Deputy to the Director of the ITU Radio Communication Bureau. Also on the 2nd of November, lots of things on that day at noon. WMO will hold a press conference together with WHO, so WMO and WHO, and that will be on the State of Climate Services for Health report. The speakers will be Professor Petteri Talas, as you know, WMO Secretary General, together with Dr. Maria Neira, the Director of Department of Environment, Climate Change and Health at WHO, and Dr. Joy Schumacher-Guimont, Joint WMO-WHO Office on Climate and Health. And then my last point is about the committees. The Committee on the Elimination of Discriminations Against Women will close this afternoon at 5 p.m. It's 86th session. The concluding observation on Nicaragua, whose report has been reviewed in the absence of delegation, as you know. There was just a permanent representative who made an opening statement before leaving the room. So that particular concluding observation will be issued only in February 2024 at the next session of the committee. The Human Rights Committee will have next Wednesday morning, 1st of November, a public meeting to hear the presentation of the progress reports on the follow-up to concluding observation and follow-up to views. And I think you have a list of countries, I won't repeat it. And then finally, the Committee Against Torture will open next Monday morning at 10 a.m. Its 78th session, which will last until 24th of November at Palais Wilson. The countries to be reviewed under these sessions are Burundi, Costa Rica, Kiribati, Denmark, Egypt, and Slovenia. And this is all I have for you today. Let me see. Christian has a question. Go ahead, Christian, please.
Thank you, Alessandra. Could you share the contact details for Sophie? For years, it has been next to impossible to report on CITES because it's unclear who is the spokesperson or who is available. So if Sophie is available, that would be great to have her contact details.
Yes, sure. Okay, so Sophie is the chief governing bodies unit at CITES. So I guess she is also informed about this particular meeting. She was accompanied by one of our colleagues, and we will try to get the contacts of both to you as soon as the briefing is over. Thank you, Christian. Yes, Gabriela.
Thank you. Do you know the reason why the report on Nicaragua will be issued in February? After the ambassador was really rude with the CEDAW, with the committee members. Yeah, if you can.
Unfortunately, I think you should ask these questions to our colleagues of the council. I'm afraid I won't have. Yeah, I mean, I would go to them and ask the answer for you. So I think it's easier if you just contact our colleagues at the council. In fact, no, not at the council. In fact, at the OHCHR, there is, as you know, a colleague who is in charge of the committees of the treaty bodies. Any other question for me? No. So thank you very much. Have a very nice weekend, and I'll see you on next Tuesday. Thank you.